I'm Rachel Terry. I'm the Deputy Director with the League of Cities and Towns. And this is our kickoff event for a new program that we're offering called Lunch with the League. Lunch with the League will be twice a month. We'll be offering webinars. It will cover topics on leadership like the one today. We'll cover all the things that come up as part of operating a city, law enforcement, kind of nuts and bolts elected officials things, how to get more involved with the league, how the legislative process works, and how the league handles that. We'll be talking about all kinds of things, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. Not all the topics are for everybody, or you might not be able to join us for all of them, but we welcome you to share this resource with anyone within your communities if it's helpful to them. And if there's a particular topic you think that the league should be offering, please email me at rterry@ulct.org and let me know about a certain topic that might have meaning for you as you are trying to do your work. Let's see here. We're going to go ahead and get started. John Park is going to make introductions, but again, we're very excited that you're here with us today for our Lunch with the League, and we hope to see you at our events, which will be starting in August. They'll be the first and third Tuesday of the month. You'll be seeing those announcements in our Friday Facts and also in our separate emails. And I'll turn it over to you, John.
Well, hey, thanks, Rachel. It's so good to be here. Thank you for tuning in today to this webinar. We are excited. We're excited to kick this off this way. I am going to introduce Barry Rellaford, who, by the way, it's his twin's birthday today.
My twin's birthday, yeah.
Which is actually Barry's birthday as well, of course, but and he's taken the time to join us. I've known Barry for a long time, and Barry has worked all over the world, and his bio list, works in 140 countries, has great clients all over. Last year at the Rose Bowl, he was the most conflicted person I know, because I know he's a Utah fan, but he has his master's degree from Ohio State and a degree from Brigham Young University. Barry is founder of the Strength of 10, a consultancy focused on inspiring individuals and work. And he has extensive experience in learning and development. He was the co-founder of the programming and master facilitator for The Speed of Trust, a book written by Stephen M.R. Covey that's been around for a lot of years now and is a great concept. He also is an author of a business parable called The Slice of Trust. And right now, Stephen M.R. Covey has a new book out, and Barry's going to introduce us to that. And Barry has all kinds of qualifications. His latest endeavor that I'm excited about, and he's really excited about, is his work with the Sorensen Center for Moral and Ethical Leadership at the Marriott School of Business at BYU. Even though I could go on and on and on about all the background and how qualified Barry is, let me just tell you a quick story, and that tells you, I think, a whole lot about Barry. And November 8th, 2018, you might remember a fire called the Camp Fire. It happened just outside of Paradise, California. Paradise, California literally burned to the ground. 90% of the buildings were completely destroyed. Numerous people lost their lives. And Paradise, California happens to be Barry's hometown. And Barry, there's a lot of things you can do when you're 600 miles away. But let me tell you what Barry did. Barry, along with a good friend of his, and created a program where they took trailers, travel trailers, and people donated them. They find money to purchase them. They got fixed up, worked with Stewart's RV in American Fork to fix them up, and had a whole bunch of them. I don't remember the last count, but had a whole bunch of them delivered, taken from Utah, motorhomes. In fact, one motorhome went 45 miles an hour all the way over to Paradise, California, and just provided people with a place to sleep. And and Barry organized all that. He put all kinds of time and effort and months and months and months of work in that. And that, I think, tells you about what you need to know about Barry Rellaford. So on his birthday, let me just turn the time over to my good friend, Barry Rellaford. Barry.
Hey, John, thank you. And boy, I wish you hadn't brought up Paradise.
Yeah.
That really picks me up. Because one of those good friends who drove with me on that first trip where we ended up with 20 motorhomes and travel trailers. Almost all of them were travel trailers due to California emissions laws. But John drove over a trailer on that first trip and went back another time as well. And I just really appreciate John. It's just my favorite movie is It's a Wonderful Life. And what I love about that movie is that when George Bailey, if you're familiar with that, gets in trouble, he really finds out, no man is a failure who has friends. So I'm so grateful for John. And looking at our Zoom list here, I recognize some of the names there. And I'm so grateful that you folks are taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. And Shay from Lehigh, recognize Michelle Kafusi from the great city of Provo. I work at BYU, so I love Provo and all the great things that are happening here in our city. So, and they say there's two kinds of people in the world: those you've met, your friends, and those you have yet to meet. So I hope to meet you at some point. I'm going to share some slides today. I will be in and out of this, and I'm assuming from a participation standpoint, I'm checking here with our moderators. Can people chat, or can we open up in what ways can people participate on this call?
Yeah, I think chat room. Just if you have a question, drop it in the chat, and I'll monitor the chat and interrupt Barry whenever something comes in. Good.
Whatever you want to talk about is probably more important than whatever I've prepared. So what we'll talk about today, by the way, is based on a new book by Stephen M.R. Covey called Trust and Inspire. As John mentioned, I was involved with Stephen's earlier books, particularly The Speed of Trust, which was his first big book, but Stephen's written others since then. And I actually got involved as his executive coach. Stephen called me up one day about 19 years ago and said, "Hey, Barry, I'm giving a speech and they want my slides." And I'm like, "Do you need help with PowerPoint?" He said, "No, I don't have slides or speech." And we got together. He did not have a speech or slides, but he did have years of experience and had done a lot of research. And it's been a great journey. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Like I say, I'll be in and out of these a bit. And feel free to chat or share things because I want to make sure this is relevant to you and makes a difference. So everybody see those slides okay? Yes? Rachel, we got slides up? Great. So I want to just tell, and this story is related to Paradise, California very quickly, but the purpose of this story isn't so much about me as I hope it inspires something in you. And I want you to think about this for yourself. When I was 15, I was a sophomore in high school, and we had a new teacher named Mr. Ellison, Kim Ellison, who you see pictured here. And Kim was a young teacher. He'd been teaching, I think it was his second year of high school teaching, and he was teaching at Paradise High. And he just helped me find my voice. I got to know him over the next couple of years of high school and ended up being his teacher's aide. And my career goal when I graduated from high school was to be a high school English teacher. Not just because I liked English, but I wanted to have the same influence in people's lives that Mr. Ellison had in mind. If you look at me as a senior, don't you love those tuxedos? I don't fit in that anymore. But it's when we think about leadership and thinking about a leader, you have a story like mine, and I could spend the rest of our time together telling you about what a difference the specific things Mr. Ellison did, but a lot of it was helping a shy kid find his voice. At first it was in writing, turning in a journal, 2-page journal a week that we needed to turn in. And later it was in conversations and getting to be his teacher's aide and teaching class and things that as a high school student, I look back and go, boy, he really gave me a lot of trust and a lot of opportunity. So I'd like you to think about this for a moment of somebody in your world who trusted you, who believed in you, maybe saw something in you you didn't see in yourself, or gave you an opportunity. Sometimes we feel like, oh, it's not like they trusted me a lot. They just let me do it, or they were desperate. There was nobody else. Yet for us, it's this experience that we've had of, there was a leader. So give you a moment to think about that. And who was this person who believed in you, saw something in you, gave you an opportunity? but in many ways, they trusted and inspired you. Now, I don't think we have the ability to open up voice here, but I wonder in the chat, does anybody have a quick story you want to share? Or Rachel, can I put you on the spot? Do you mind?
I don't mind. One of the people I worked with in my last job, his name's Brian. He's the director of state risk. And anytime I had raised, like, I would like to try this thing to improve outcomes, he'd say, great, do it, and gave me a lot of autonomy to pursue things that I thought were worthwhile, and then would increasingly give me more opportunities for leadership and also more responsibility. And the more that happened, the more confident I felt in my ability to do things, which I'd had sort of a narrow focus on what I thought I was and could do. And he's like, oh no, there's a lot more out there. And I kind of felt that way about myself, but having someone else validate it was a game changer for me.
That's wonderful, Rachel. What a beautiful story. And did you do everything perfectly in those things you took on?
No, lots of failure, lots of mistakes.
And yet he kept extending trust. Was he foolish to do that, to keep trusting you?
No, he wasn't. And I say that because the things we were able to accomplish, I thought were meaningful and helpful, even when I made mistakes. And he was good at expressing that. And he could express, like, this is a good thing and you're doing a good thing. And could also say, that didn't quite work out. Let's try something else.
Yeah. What do we learn from that? How do we grow from that? And that is so indicative of learning and growth as people. It's actually one of the things that's really dangerous is when somebody has a lot of success consistently. I was talking with somebody who's a expert in grit and doing research on positive psychology. Carolyn told me, she said there was a young man from her, she says, she lives in the DC area. I don't know where exactly, but she said, I live in the highest per capita income zip code in the country. This is people in my neighborhood. She wasn't boasting. She was just using it as an important data point for what she then shared. She said, people live around me, the kids my kids went to school with, they have lots of opportunities. This sounds like the 1% we hear about. But she said a really tragic thing happened recently. A young man I know graduated from high school, went to the college he wanted to go to, but he didn't get into the fraternity that he wanted to. And so he took his life. And she said he had never failed at anything. He'd never had anything not go his way. And at probably 18 years old, this was devastating. And there's a lot to be said for failure or mistakes. They need to be contained. They need to be wise. But for us to grow into who we are and to develop, one of the key words you used, I heard, Rachel, is confidence. And in French, the word for trust is la confiance. The French do have one. And the word for confidence is la confiance. It's the same word. Same thing in Spanish. Confianza means both trust and confidence. Same thing in Portuguese. From what I understand in Arabic, teca. I'm not maybe pronouncing that exactly right, but it means confidence and trust. And when I think about trust, this is something for us, it really develops confidence. And confidence is not ego or bravado or, oh, I'm so great. Did you know that I'm somebody? That's not what confident people are like. And as I've been able to associate with some very well-known people at the top of their fields, whether it be entertainment, sports, business, government, I find that for the most part, not always, but for the most part, these people tend to be very confident, but that confidence is not founded on how great they think they are. It's their sense of calling, that they are there to be able to serve others. And those are the people I choose to follow. Those are leaders. When I think about a leader, there was a leader. Often that's what they do. So Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your story. That's such a great story. And I would invite you to share was it Frank? Did I hear his name was Frank?
Brian.
Brian, sorry, it sounds just like Frank, yeah. But I would invite you to make sure Brian knows about that story, that experience that you had with him. I hope he does.
I will. I don't know if you can see it, but Kaylee has shared a story. Can you see it in the chat?
Okay. I see there's a chat, but I am not able to see. John, or you guys
I'll read it. So
Great, please.
Kaylee says, I served with Susan Pulsifer on the Jordan School Board, and she taught by sharing stories that we could all relate to. She also led with an attitude of we all matter and together we are stronger.
Mm-hmm. Kaylee, thanks for sharing that. Those principles that we've been exposed to, hopefully are starting to learn and integrate and apply ourselves, really those things about being a leader. So let me jump back to slides here for a moment and share that. And again, I hope you'll share your story with somebody, because I think a lot of these stories could be said about you. But since January 2020, I know there's a lot of things been going on, but and again, please feel free to share these in the chat. What kinds of changes have you observed, whether in your cities, in your communities, in our nation, across the globe? What's been going on since January 2020? Feel free to share that in the chat. Wow, I guess nothing's been going on since then.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll speak for our group. And please, anyone else, just throw something in the chat. But, obviously the pandemic and, these pictures kind of highlight the pandemic, the isolation that came with it and the uncertainty, but not just that, but all the things that it triggered, like people working more from home, the technology changes, the way we've consumed media and how we communicate with our neighbors, and some good and some less good.
Absolutely. When we look at some things are out in the open that weren't so much before. And as cities and towns dealing with a lot of these issues and people being the worst global health crisis in 100 years, there's a lot that's come out of that. And what we're seeing is that the world has changed. But what's interesting is that in many ways, for many, their style of leadership is not. And even pre-pandemic or all these other polarization and other changes we're seeing, things were shifting, but boy, have we seen it happen in a very short period of time. And I want to take us back. Some of you will recognize this story, but I did a little bit of high jumping in high school just for PE because you had to do it. But some of you may remember this story about Dick Fosbury. And as you watch this, I invite you to consider a lot of things came together at the 1968 Mexico Olympics. And what, in particular, something though changed in conditions that made what the story, the short little about 5-minute story, made possible. So a question I've got for us, I love that story. I know it's a little long, but I love track and field. And as we look at what changed for not just Dick Fosbury, but for all the competitors that allowed things to be different at the 1968 Olympics. It wasn't just his style, but something else changed. And it's kind of subtle. You may not have picked this up in the video.
Didn't it say the landing pad changed?
It did. That's exactly what I was thinking about, Rachel. It's the pad change. Yeah, as Carolyn says, a soft place to land. Yeah, before that, I mean, if you've ever landed in sand, it's like falling down at the beach. But now imagine you're doing that from a couple meters up. That doesn't feel that great. Or they'd have these wooden boxes that they put the sand in, and sometimes people hit the box. It just doesn't make you all that eager to jump over this pole, land on it. So the conditions and the rules changed. And Dick Fosbury is from Medford, Oregon, right near where my wife grew up. That rule change, the materials change, the rule change allowed for a new innovation to happen. Now, again, he's studied, he was an engineer, he'd studied that. He said later, some of it was just luck or inspiration that came to him. He was trying out something different. When we look at this, I think it's an important thing for us to think about as leaders is how do we change, with the conditions that changed. Whoops. I think I don't have my slides showing. Sorry. There we go. I can see them. But the conditions changed in that they had different padding, and it's been that way ever since. Now they say it's the only way to jump. I think about 90% of competitive high jumpers do what's called now the Fosbury flop. And he actually named it, which is interesting, in an interview with a reporter not long after this. He first was doing it in high school and college. But this is a change of conditions, because if we look at it, many times we look at leadership is kind of a mechanical thing. It's like fixing a car. Oh, do I fix a car? Well, I just need to get the right parts, put them in the right order, and change it. And that's why my organization needs to get better. But what we really see is it's a more organic process. There are natural systems that we're working with that we really help to cultivate or create the conditions in which people can grow. And you've experienced that, and I have, where leaders gave us opportunities to grow. Rachel, you experienced that with Brian, working at the state and the AG's office, is being able to have those conditions where you could find out for yourself and develop that confidence and the skills to be able to get you to the role today and be more of who you are. So how we do this is we think about the word potential that's within us as people, is that it's having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future. As leaders, what we're seeking to do is to help create conditions where the potential within the people and the systems of our cities and towns and other organizations we're leading can happen. And as a noun, it's these latent qualities or abilities that can be developed. So if we can see the potential in people, if we can communicate that to them, much again, going back to your story about Brian, Rachel, of being able to say, you know, he saw something in you, saw beyond your narrower view of yourself. He saw a broader view. He developed that. It sounds like you talked about if there was a mistake, you learned from it together, but it's really unleashing. The potential is already within you. It's how do we unleash that? So in the past, it used to be that leadership seemed like it was much like rowing in a, you know, if you read Boys in the Boat, et cetera, that's a great example. But under certain conditions in a still stream or, you know, quiet stream or lake, it's one thing to row and to have a leader up front who calls out the orders that everyone follows. But today, it's much like permanent whitewater. And it's a great sport we have here in Utah. But where you have a hard time seeing or hearing and just trying to keep people in the boat, safely making it down the stream is the adventure that awaits us. And this requires, with these changing conditions, changing leadership. So some of you mentioned some of the things that have changed in the last couple of years is that we see that the nature of the world has changed. We are not operating in the same world. Work has changed. The workplace has changed. The workforce has changed, and the nature of choice has changed. We have many more options than we used to have. And if you look at the great resignation, as it's being called, the American workforce right now, people are exercising this choice, and they're saying, I want to work from home, or I want more flexibility. And it's very challenging for us as employers to be able to create those conditions in which people can thrive. So what this work in this book, this Trust and Inspire, is about is based on something that Stephen M.R. Covey calls a meta style. It's kind of your fundamental glasses through which you see the world. And again, in a calmer world, you can be authoritative. You can tell people what to do and expect them to follow the orders. And if you don't like it, I'll find somebody else who'll do it. We've become more enlightened, though. We recognize, well, people have feelings, people have different conditions. I need to be, consider that. But fundamentally, there's still kind of command and control. If people aren't willing to live with that, we're going to, you're not going to make it. There's something else, though, called Trust and Inspire, and it's some research from a company called LRN. They do a lot of work in ethics, governance, and also in this kind of research. Is they found that in their research, a fairly extensive study looked at 30% of people perceived that leaders were U.S. military, and people often say, well, command and control, it's military. Those who've worked with the military, particularly special forces, recognize they do not operate from this in the way we traditionally think about it. Many leaders are more enlightened, but they're fundamentally still command and control. It's still, they're going to be in charge, they're enforce the hierarchy, and they're limiting, it's not bad, please don't hear this, and these do work. If they didn't work, we would have given up these styles a long time ago. But there's another option that, according to LRN's research, and I would see this much in the work I've done with trust for many, many years, beyond speed of trust, is that very few leaders are actually trusting and inspiring. So Brian may be more of an anomaly here. Hopefully not, Rachel. You can be so many times a simple way to think about this is that authoritarian command and control is what can I do to you? And we're on the lookout for like, ooh, what are they going to do to me? Whereas enlightened is, well, what can I do for you? You do this for me, I'll do this for you. What can I do for you? But truly, when we're trusted and inspires, what can I do with you? How do we together create a different outcome? And a business example of this is Microsoft. So Microsoft, we've all heard of, we've got their software on our computers. They were started by Bill Gates probably 35, 40 years ago, or actually more than that, maybe, over 40 years ago. But Satya Nadella is the current CEO, and he took over a company from Steve Ballmer, who had succeeded Bill Gates. And what they found is that there's two things they needed to do, and that we find you need to do these emerging forces. You need to win in the workplace. You've got to have a high trust culture that inspires people. And you've got to win in your marketplace, which I recognize is different for cities and towns. But the marketplace is still, it's the voters, it's the citizens, it's the suppliers, it's the other people, our communities that say, how do we collaborate and innovate in ways that are new and different to be able to help create that? If you look at just the business results for Microsoft in February 2014, so about 8 years ago when Satya Nadella became the CEO, their stock was about $36 a share. I checked this morning, $264 a share. Again, it's not all Satya Nadella, but it has a lot to do with him and the leadership that he's brought about, which is very much a trust and inspire model. And Microsoft has reinvented itself as a company. I worked with them a number of years ago, and they are not the same company they were then, which is a good thing. So trust and inspire is a way of leading that sees, communicates, develops, and unleashes the inherent greatness of people. What it's not is being weak. It's not a lack of control, lack of structure, lacking vision or direction, or expecting a lot out of people and holding them accountable, holding ourselves accountable. So this is it's not that we're being soft and nice and then be trusting and, just let people do what they want to do. Not at all. But it's very much, it inspires the greatness, inspires the best out of us. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides again for a minute and just see, are there questions, comments, anything particularly from Rachel or John or anything that you want to share here? This is brought to mind.
Well, let me just encourage anyone listening to throw something into the chat. If there's something you want to ask questions about or raise, please do that, because we want to make sure we utilize Barry's experience.
Yeah, I usually know what I'm going to say, not always, but so I love to respond to things that are important to you.
Well, let me ask this, and if it's an inappropriate pivot, then tell me. But
go ahead.
How do you accomplish this in an environment where there's a lot of conflict, right? Where you've got angry citizens, or where you're sitting on a city council where just like there's just a lot of conflict, not just tension, but like conflict. How do you still accomplish this trust and inspire?
Yeah, and Rachel, I'm going to give a brief answer now, and then I'm going to talk more about what it is and how to do it and see if that helps speak to that. But fundamentally, one is framing up what is conflict. At its simplest place, conflict is we see things differently. And that's actually a good thing. It's one of the things, particularly the American system of governance, is a good thing, that we don't have to all see things the same way. Because if we do, I've said this for years, but if two people see things the same way, you don't need one of them. Now, again, I'm not trying to be harsh here, but it takes a lot of trust actually to have conflict, to have true conflict. And so I look at conflict a little bit differently. It's not contest. It's not that, I've got to win at your expense, winners and losers. It's that, good, you see it differently. Well, we're going to have a lot of trust, and I need to understand how you really see things, Rachel. I need to really listen and deeply understand what I see. And again, the pandemic has affected this in a lot of ways, but a lot of us holed up, hunkered in our bunkers, has not been good for mental health at all. And we are not over this. And I don't want to pretend all the complicated things we have, but this has not helped. So there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, and there's a great need for us to be able to express that more effectively, more productively with one another. So some of this I see as a lack of skill, some is a lack of will on the part of our various constituencies. But just conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. I actually think it's a really good thing, where we can come together and see things differently. So I don't know if that helps. That's kind of a philosophical response, Rachel, but I want to acknowledge what is. Then, especially as we get into, well, so what is this trust and inspire? How is this different than how we might be leading today? Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is.
Let me jump into this a little bit more and just see if this will help frame up more, kind of say what it is or isn't. But let's take a look at how do you do this. So we look at three basic what we call stewardships. So stewardship is a job with a trust. All of us, especially serving in the public sector, it's a job with a trust. We cannot do our jobs without the public trust. And whether you're elected or appointed or hired, fundamentally, stakeholders, constituencies need to be able to support that decision, or over time they'll do something about it to exert their will. Diane just mentioned, by the way, Dr. Covey, this is Stephen M.R.'s dad, Stephen R. Covey, has a book called The Third Alternative. It's a great book about listening in conflict. And I agree, Diane. Thank you for sharing that. So we look at these three stewardships, we call it modeling, is where we start, is looking at who are we as people? What are we modeling or showing or demonstrating? People, in this case of modeling, we're not thinking about clothing, we're thinking about what is a person an example of? And you've probably heard this as I have, what are the three most important things in raising children? Example, example, example. But it's also true in leading or providing space for people to grow into who they are. There's trusting, which we'll talk about, and also inspiring. So we'll share these. So modeling, there's, and again, I'm summarizing a, 300 something page book. Just over 300 page book in less than an hour, and trying to do a decent job at it. But so there's a lot more to it. But we believe there's some fundamental beliefs. And one is that enduring influence is created from the inside out. It starts with who we are, and it expands from there into all of our relationships. And that leaders go first. We don't wait for other people to change or to become better or to be less angry or whatever. We start. We say, I'm going to give to people around me someone who can be trusted. That's my credibility or believability or trustworthiness. And this idea of moral authority. Okay, moral can really get people in hot water at times, but fundamentally it's your inner compass of what's right or wrong. And are we tuning into that? That's what gives us moral authority. Just, am I doing what I believe is right? And do I trust that other people are trying to do that as well, even if they see things very differently than I do? But what are we modeling? What are we giving to people? So thinking about this for ourselves is, what are we modeling? I found, as I read the manuscript, because Stephen had been working on this for several years, or doing some other work, and as I was looking at the manuscript for this book, first 100 pages or so, I was going like, yeah, I know that, yeah, very familiar with that, building on his dad's work, yeah. And then it was probably about 100 pages in, I realized, you know what, Barry, I think in one particular stewardship I have in my life, I thought, I don't think I'm a trusted and inspired leader. I think I'm actually more enlightened command and control. I'm not very often authoritarian. And I started going like, wow. And it really kind of like took the glasses off that I was used to looking at the world through, and opened me up to going, wow, what is it to be a trusted and inspired leader? How can I be more of a trusted and inspired leader? But it begins with modeling. The second stewardship, again, I'm going through this very quickly, but this is a question, or really a statement that says it's possible for two trustworthy people who are modeling trust, to work together and yet not have trust between them. How can that be? Please take a moment and chat. How can it be that you can have two trustworthy, good humans who are in an association, whether it could be they're both elected to a city council, or it could be a city manager, city mayor, or city council member, could be professional staff, it could be somebody here working at the league. How can it be possible we could have two trustworthy people working together and yet not have trust? Feel free to chat at us.
I'm going to give everybody a second to weigh in on the chat.
We got a chat.
There we go. They have different opposing views of virtues and values.
Yeah. Thank you, Nassim.
Because humans have differing opinions about each other.
Mm-hmm. I agree with those. And what we'd add to that is that trusting isn't, got another one too. Great. Thank you for participating, Michelle. They haven't had an opportunity to extend trust, or trust hasn't been tested and proven. Well said. Don't have the same objective. I agree. These are really insightful comments. By the way, I often find when I talk about trust and inspiration and leadership, I gather a group of experts. You know a lot of this. And what we do, and a lot of the work I do with the Covey folks, is that we package common sense. But the challenge is that common sense is not always common practice. And how do we have that be our default, our habit of being able to do things that are going like, yeah, that makes sense. What happens is, if neither, and this goes what Mayor Kafusi said here, is that neither person is willing to extend trust to each other. This is a choice. Trust is a noun, it's an outcome, but it's also a verb. And it's a choice that we make to trust each other. So in the speed of trust, and John Park and I, by the way, have done a lot of work with this, and after 18 years of teaching this, now it's going on 19 that I've done this, we've sold over 2.5 million books. It's a lot of books, thousands of workshops and speeches with thousands of organizations. And again, I've worked with all these different types you see here, I've worked with personally. And by the way, I haven't been to 140 countries. I've trained people from over 140 countries. I've only been to about 30, just to be precise. But thousands of individual organizational assessments. This is a lot of stuff we've done. And with tens of thousands, probably more like hundreds of thousands of leaders. What have we learned? You think, why do you need another book on trust, Covey people? And this is what we've learned, is that trusting is hard. It's hard. It's hard to trust other people. Sometimes it's hard to trust ourselves. And this is a thing that we really see a need for. And many times when I go back and work with the same organizations repeatedly, it's not that people are struggling with modeling. Yes, there are some people who do not have the emotional maturity or skill. They tend to be a bit selfish, sometimes a lot selfish, where they're not great to work with to begin with. And you've got some difficult things on a modeling standpoint. But many times I find that, no, you got good people, but they are not extending trust to each other. Why? Because it's hard. And one of the things in the book we get into are some other things that get in the way, such as people think, oh, I already do this, or I'm the smartest person in the room, or it's not worth taking the risk. There are some pitfalls and things that are good to consider that we won't talk about today. But this number that you see on the screen is the difference in our surveys. We again surveyed, I'll bet I know it's in the tens of thousands, it's probably in the hundreds of thousands of people, about how much trust do you extend as a leader and how much trust does your leader extend to you. This number, negative 277%, is the difference between the self-view of how much leaders say, I trust people, or the people that report to me, and what they say, how much they feel trusted or believe they're trusted. There is a great gap. And this alone is one of those things to consider. If you think the problem is out there, well, these people just can't be trusted, or they're not very trusting. It starts with us. Am I extending trust in a way that's useful? And am I really doing this? Or am I kind of enlightened, but when push comes to shove, there's going to be some pushing and shoving. Being able to say, how do we make that difference? What it means to have trust, how do we equal that? As we think about somebody who's trustworthy or modeling it, and you've heard this, is trust earned, is trust given? Well, trustworthy is modeling it. Trust, it's earned. We do earn it. And through trusting, we give trust. We grant it to one another. So this is a choice we need to deliberately make. And as a leader, but Mr. Ellison, my high school English teacher, I suppose I trusted him the first few days of class, whatever. He's just a teacher kind of thing. Like I had a bunch of teachers, but he trusted me. He extended trust to me, and not just me, other students as well. But over time, there were other opportunities I had to be trusted that he gave me, to the point where there'd be times he would have me lead class as a senior in high school. And again, it was such an affirming experience to be able to say, wow. And when I ran for student council, class office, he encouraged me to do that. It encouraged me to see my potential. And Rachel, sounds like Brian's done the same thing for you, is that you were trustworthy, but somebody's got to take that step and make that possible. So what trusting, where this comes from, is really the beliefs here is that greatness is inside of people. Our job is not to pour that into people. Here we are to unleash them, or not to control them. It doesn't mean we don't have guidelines and policies and procedures, and there's things that absolutely need to be in place. But are we looking through this lens of trust? I was working with a city in Texas, and as we were talking through trust, one of the things they noticed, I think John may work with the city as well, that about a third of their ordinances and policies, procedures, things around the books, basically signaled to their professional staff, we don't trust you. And so they took them off the books. They changed it. Now, I know that's a lot of work, and I'm not advocating that's what you should do. But think through when you're putting a new policy or procedure or ordinance in place, and certainly there's things the league recommends, or you've got outside counsel, whoever it may be. Please listen to those stakeholders as well. But there are times where you're looking, or the legislature may just say, hey, this is the way it's going to be. But being able, as you look at how do you implement that, or ones that you can put in place as a city council or elected officials, is saying, what's the message this sends? Or is there another way to do this, that we can prevent this issue, but in a way that signals to our staff, we trust you, we have confidence in you, you are professionals. And if that's an issue, you've got to deal with the real issue. You may not have the right people there. I know I'm simplifying a lot of complexity into these simple little phrases, but what we find is this is how it works. Carl Freudenberg founded something. He says that I prefer to give my trust 100 times and risk being disappointed 2 or 3 times than to live perpetually in an atmosphere of distrust. And it's one of the challenges we have right now. I think, Rachel, you pointed that out. When we talk about conflicts and the anger, right now, I would say more so than I've seen in my whole career, which is getting up there now into decades. But we live in a very polarized, very echo chamber. One of the things is the internet and all the algorithms and things where people keep hearing the same kind of voices over and over, angrier and angrier, and trolls, instead of really being able to listen to one another in communities. And this atmosphere of distrust is perpetuated, and we need to change this because we will continue to get the results we're getting, or worse if we don't. Some of you may remember Paul Williams. He was a songwriter, and you probably will recognize the name Jim Henson. If you've heard of Henson Associates or The Muppet Show, Jim Henson, the first movie, you may remember the TV show, The Muppet Show. The first movie was called The Muppet Movie. And Paul Williams tells the story. He says, Jim Henson had to be the easiest and most trusting man I ever had the opportunity to work with. When we met for the first time as a team in my den to discuss the basic outline of the story, I was given a gift I would always treasure. Walking Jim to his car, I told him I'd keep him in the loop as Kenny Asher and I wrote the songs for the film. He responded with, oh, that's all right, Paul. He might have said, oh, that's all right, Paul. No. I'll hear them in the studio when we record them. I'm sure they'll be terrific. That's a lot of trust. This is the first movie feature film that the Muppet, Henson Associates is putting out. And Paul Williams, although he's a very experienced songwriter, he wrote some of the early Carpenters hits, if remember the Carpenters, and he was a very well-known songwriter. And yet, does he write all these feature film things? And what if they don't like it? And what if they need to change it? But Jim Henson said, oh, I'm sure they'd be terrific. This is what Paul Williams continues. He says, never in decades of writing songs for a living have I encountered such trust, been given so much freedom. Jim gave us his trust. We gave him the Rainbow Connection. Yeah, very special song there. So it's, I love this story, not just because of Kermit the Frog, but when you think about the best work you've done and the greatest work you do right now, it's probably from people who trust you. Again, Rachel, I love your story of being able to be trusted and what that's brought about. So as you look here, and again, as you get in, if you decide to get the book and want to learn more about Trust and Inspire, there's this, we do a lot of contrasts through this and look at things of, when we think of command and control, it's not bad. Please don't hear that, oh, command and control is bad, Trust and Inspire is good. It's not that. Command and control works, but it's much like playing, I don't know, playing tennis with a golf club. You know, it's the wrong tool for the reality you're in. And the same way here, you know, it's trying to do the Fosbury, or not, you know, trying to do the old scissors method of going over the high jump bar when the conditions have changed. Being trust and inspire is about being trustworthy and trusting. Many times we look at, oh, the gardener's in control, the mechanic's in control, but no, it's really the power's in the seed itself. How do we unleash that power? So as you look through this, you might think about, what are some of these statements that resonate most with you, particularly around trust and inspire? Are there anybody wants to comment on through chat? And then I'll just finish up with
Barry, let me make, if I can make a comment, Barry. You know, I really love the that grow people aspect of it. I think that oftentimes, I'm not saying we're afraid of that, but I think oftentimes we're so focused on task at hand that if we can get in a situation that we're growing people, that they automatically fit and adapt to the changing conditions, and it's a win-win situation. That's, I think, how I look at it.
I agree, John. In fact, I think all of us have heard variations of these stories, but a common one is about a father who wants to help his children grow into more responsible people, and so they have a little truck farm or something, and you know, they live next door to somebody who's running a real farm, and the farmer's going like, hey, look, you know, that chicken coop your kids are putting together, or, you know, whatever they're doing is, you know, they're not doing a very good job on that. And the father responds, hey, I'm growing boys, not grass or chickens or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So fundamentally, I agree with you, John. What if our role as leaders, my first priority is to grow people? And to grow those people, we'll get the job done. I know we need to get the job done. I am totally clear on that. Tasks must be accomplished. That is not a discussion. You know, that's like, yep, got to do that. But is the first priority task accomplishment, as you said, John, or is it to grow people? And I am so grateful to the leaders in my life who I know they knew I'd get stuff done because I wanted to do the work better. I expected more out of myself. I worked harder when I was trusted versus somebody who just was kind of like, didn't expect, oh, yeah, I thought that's what you do, or you're not that great, and doesn't build confidence. But it's like, no, I want to give my best work. This invites, trust is one of the most compelling forms of human motivation. And it invites us to be more mature, it invites us to be better. And it takes a lot of work. This is not the easy path. The easy path's retreat into our positions and to blame the other party and say, yep, couldn't make it work. Versus being able to stay in the process and say, no, these are good people. I'm going to trust, and we're going to create an environment where we can all win and learn together. That takes a lot of work. And it comes to our third stewardship. I'm sensitive to our time here. I want to make sure that we just mention that at least briefly. And in this one, what we're looking at is the whole concept of inspiring, because the power is in the seed. And just it goes back to what you're mentioning, John, is how do those that you lead and serve know their growth is your priority? That's my first priority, helping them grow. We'll get the work done. So inspiring is built on this belief that people are whole. We have body, mind, heart, and spirit. And spirit, again, doesn't necessarily need to be religious. It's that we have a sense of meaning and purpose. Our lives matter. Our job as a leader is to inspire them from within rather than try to motivate them from without. And also the belief that leadership stewardship, I put service above self-interest. Again, I know I'm talking to public sector leaders. Some of you have worked in for-profit organizations or do, and there's nothing wrong with for-profit. I think for-profit business is a great way to bring about change, positive change in the world as well. But this is public interest, self-interest. You've been elected to something. You're really trying to make a better community. It's not the easy way, but it is, whoa, what a worthy way. I was just on a plane, well, a lot of planes yesterday, flying down to Houston and back. And, they always give these instructions, put on your own oxygen mask first. And these days they say, remove any other masks you have on, put on your oxygen mask. But if we're going to inspire other people, we need to be inspired first. And inspired isn't charismatic. It's not dramatic. It's not a personality trait. It's that we are getting enough oxygen, literally drawing in enough oxygen. Dr. Angela Duckworth's written a wonderful book on grit, and she runs a lab. And she says, you can go from a job to a career to a calling, all without changing your occupation. And I love the public servants I've met who really look at this not as a job, but this is a calling. This is a call comes to me. I see needs in the world that I want to make a difference in. And I believe I'm going to use my gifts and my talents to do that. And that why is very powerful. Maya Angelou, who's one of our great American poets, has said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And you've heard this, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And as much as that trite, the thing we talk about something being trite or a cliche, is that a cliche is a truth that's repeated a lot, and it's still a truth. So as cliche as this may sound, or Hallmark card thing, is that this is a thing of, and I know a lot of you are elected, you understand the power of relationships. So I want to finish with a story here. Let me just stop for a moment, see if there's are there any questions, comments? Anything did we get back to your question, Rachel? I don't know if we've shared enough here that helps with when you're in an angry environment and how to be a voice of calm, maturity, creating listening.
Yeah. I mean, if you have any other examples or advice, I'd take it, but.
I think one of the best things, and somebody mentioned this, let's see who it was, or one of our comments. It was Kayleen Whitelock who mentioned about Susan Pulsifer on the Jordan School Board. Stories, there's an American psychologist, Carl Rogers. This isn't Mr. Rogers of the neighborhood. Carl Rogers said that which is most personal is most universal. In other words, when we share our stories and as authentically as possible, that's something people can disagree with, but it's hard to say to somebody that didn't happen to you. That's not your story. It's like, that's my story. Now, how I interpret it, how they would interpret it, that's their call. But I think the more that we can listen to one another and to share our stories, I think it takes the anger down a lot. And the more we can listen out of others, their stories, like, you're really upset about this. I want to make sure I really understand where you're coming from. I want to know why this is so important to you. I see it differently, but I really want to understand it. And if you can repeat someone's story back to them better than they can tell it, that takes a lot of maturity and skill, but it will also shift our hearts a bit. And I have done this. I've seen it happen where I really take the time to say, this is, Rachel, I hear this is, and getting out of my head, but really into my heart as well, going like, I feel like I have a greater understanding where you're coming from. And let me share my story. And that we need more of that. That is part of dialogue and community. The word community has the word common in it. How do we get to common ground? But it also has that root, you and I, of unity, of unified, union. All that comes from one. And how out of, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. How do we as Americans come together in a society with all of our difference? And welcome the difference, be who we are. Again, I know this sounds really good philosophically, but I think these principles are accurate and true. So yeah, go ahead. I think we're out of time, but I just want to thank everybody.
We're at time. I was going to, before we conclude, are there any other questions? And I think you could see Mayor Kafusi was thanking you.
Thanks, Mayor Kafusi.
And I agree, this has been an excellent presentation. So this is your last shot to ask an expert any questions. This training it is recorded. It's going to be shared on our league website, and I encourage you to share it with people in your councils, in your city management, anyone that you think could benefit from Barry's presentation today.
Hey, well, we got happy birthdays on the chat room for you, Barry.
I saw that. That's really nice.
And part of let me just tell you why we're as we talk about this this lunch with the league bunch of seminars, the first thing I said to Rachel, I got to get Barry on here. And part of the reason we're doing it today is because in a couple of weeks we lose Barry. We're losing Barry. He's headed off to Lyon, France to serve his church for 18 months. And he'll be a great blessing to people over there, but we will miss him. But Barry, thank you for your time. So appreciate all you do and the service you do. And just thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Rachel, thank you. And thank you to all of you as elected officials. You make Utah great. I don't say that I didn't grow up here. I grew up in California. I loved it while I lived there. That state has changed a lot. I love being part of Utah. I love the communities we get to be part of. Thank you for the great work that you all are doing to make this a really good place to live.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to everyone who joined us. And Barry, this was fantastic. Gave me a lot to think about. So thank you very much.